You crouch behind a collapsed billboard, its rusted metal frame casting jagged shadows across the cracked earth. The sun glints off something half buried in the dust beside a bleached skeletal hand. It's a silver bullion round, tarnished but intact. You pocket it quickly. Not for trade, not yet. You know a grizzled old veteran of the wastes who values its worth, who remembers the days pre-collapse when silver regularly spiked from $15 to $50 or more. For now, near a small barter settlement on the outskirts of Old El Paso, you reach into your pouch for something else, a copper round, dull, warm, familiar. It's not worth much in the old world's terms, but here it buys trust, water, maybe a couple of rounds of 22 if the barter's fair. As you approach, you know you've made the right choice. Dusty merchants' faces look up at you from meager stalls. This is no place to waste silver. The drones that fly overhead, adding to the air of oppression, don't scan for copper. They're tuned to signals of wealth, to noise. But you've learned to move quickly, to trade softly, to prepare stealthily. Silver and even gold have their place, yes. You stash them away as you once did for financial gain, or for the big ticket items someday. But copper is for the now, for the grit, for the barter table in the ruins, for the small handoff that doesn't need a receipt. Its value is predictable. Copper is constant. Hello, fellow mutants. Today we're talking about the rising price of silver and gold and where that leaves copper bullion in your preps. I also have a bit of a surprise for you if you think silver is always going to be the more profitable choice than copper toward the end of this video, so watch for that. But first, if you've been watching the markets, you've seen silver climb from around $17 a round, where I bought it some years back, to where it stands now, nearly $40 or more, depending on the design and dealer. And I'm not talking about the premium of silver eagles, of course, but standard generic silver bullion. Gold? Even further out of reach, unless you like a speck-like coin in your fingertip or a fraction in a gold back. While I don't obsess over spot prices, I do stack silver and maybe some gold for financial investment. Not to flip it for profit, but to hold something real, something that might still be tradable if fiat currencies collapse. But I am not a silver bug. I also dabble in numismatic coins, in trade tokens, zinc bars, or even semi-precious stones. Each has its place. But silver is in the spotlight now due to rapid price gains. Silver has a long history of being money. It's rare, it's liquid, it's recognized. If the dollar ever falters, I want to be able to walk into a local coin shop, an LCS, and trade silver for whatever passes as the new currency. It's a contingency. It's smart. While I enjoy seeing it spike, I'm not running down to sell what I have. Times are not so dire for me or the world, yet. That said, while silver has climbed fast in recent years, it's no stranger to dramatic dips. Back in 2011, silver hit nearly $50 an ounce, then crashed hard, dropping below $20 over the next couple of years. In 2020, during the COVID panic, it dipped again, briefly touching around $12 before rebounding. So while silver has real value, and I do stack it for some financial gain, and as a store of wealth, it's volatile. You've got to be ready for swings if you're going to make money with it. That's why I don't chase the price. But copper doesn't really crash. It doesn't spike either. Not at the bullion round level. Sure, that could change someday, but only once the price of the base metal comes close to exceeding the manufacturing costs for a pure copper bullion round. For now, it just holds steady. While silver and gold spike and fall and spike again, though, copper bullion rounds hover around $1.49 on sale or in bulk, or up to $2.19 or slightly more per 1 ounce, depending on the mint and quantity. That doesn't count things like ornately detailed 2-ounce Titanic rounds minted for Tuvalu, but the typical stuff you find when you search copper bullion on precious metal sites. Critics will say that's exactly why you shouldn't stack it. It's a novelty. It has no potential for a big price spike due to the offset cost of minting it. No investment upside, not unless you're trading virtual copper by digits on a screen. And I would usually agree. If you're chasing gains, physical copper isn't usually your metal. Not unless you're stealing copper pipe from homes, and I don't recommend that either. But I'll disagree with myself in just a bit if you're patient. Here's the thing, I personally don't stack copper for profit, just like I don't buy remote bug-out land in hopes of a real estate boom in the area. I stack it for survival, for barter, for its versatile physical properties, for how it can be molded in a pinch into something useful, but portable and shiny and clearly more than a zinc or bronze penny in my pocket in the meantime. It's an add-on to a tip at a restaurant, an ancient currency of trade, while so-called copper currency is gradually morphed from pure copper large cents of old to become ever smaller until it's just some other metal coated in copper gilding, or at best an alloy. As for buying some now, copper rounds might actually be cheaper than ever in real terms because you can buy more of them, relatively speaking, than, say, 5 years ago. The price hasn't surged, but the value, the usefulness remains. So to that point, it's sort of a store of wealth. Not a great one, and one certainly subject to inflation, but it can keep a floor in its value and in some cases add to it. And that finally is where my surprise comes in. Listen up, naysayers, because it was a surprise to me too. An elementary idea perhaps, and one I believe I've touched on at the edges before, but there is a way to make money off copper bullion rounds that doesn't involve you selling 16 tons of it. Before I get into this, though, I'll give the general disclaimer that I'm not a financial advisor, and any advice I give here is for informational consideration and an entertaining what-if scenario, one that involves some legwork on your part for success. So, let's say you want a little bit of financial upside with your copper bullion purchase, maybe just to balance off inflation. We'll start with collectability. Beyond the usual generic round designs I often recommend, copper rounds at the big bullion sites can feature the same designs and trendy silver counterparts. Well-known designs like Zombuck's Cryptid Creatures, Silver Shield, and Lost World designs command higher prices later. If you're into semi-numismatics, copper gives you access to that world without the silver price tag. Some of these designs, especially limited runs, resell for far more than their metal value on auction sites like eBay. You can pick up 100 Zombuck's copper rounds for about $2 each now, and some of those could be flipped to $5 or even $15 depending on demand later. You might even find a rare Copper Mutant copper bar for sale somewhere, the design Liberty Copper worked on me with a couple of years ago, or any number of other limited designs that might have some kind of collectible appeal. As I pointed out in a video before, baseball and Pokemon cards have no material value to speak of. They have value primarily in their collectability. So I asked Microsoft Copilot to do some math and research on how copper stacks up to silver in a specific scenario involving Zombuck's bullion rounds, both copper and silver, and the results were somewhat surprising. Let's say you have a $500 budget. Silver rounds offer a higher per-unit resale value and prestige, but you'd only be able to buy about 10 or 11 rounds at today's prices for the latest Zombuck's design rounds. Copper, on the other hand, lets you acquire over 200 rounds, and notably at a discount at volume sites like JM Bullion, and while each sells for less than when you put them up on eBay than silver rounds, the total resale value potentially could far exceed silver, especially if sold individually to niche collectors. Based on trends at sites like eBay, Zombuck's rounds tend to resell anywhere from $5 to $10 or more depending on the design and demand. That means your total resale could hit over $2,000 if you play it right and don't mind having a lot of packets to ship out. Silver, on the other hand, costs a lot more up front. You'd only get, as I mentioned, about 10 or 11 rounds for the same budget, but each of those could resell for $45 to $80, or maybe even more if it's a very rare one. They aren't silver eagles, though, so you'd still be selling to the semi-numismatic crowd, or those who look down their noses at bullion versus things from the US and other government-linked mints. In any case, the silver gives you a higher value per coin, but copper gives you volume and potentially more total profit growth if you're willing to do the legwork at selling them individually. It's a classic case of high margin versus high throughput. And for someone like me who values barter, survival, and collector appeal, copper stays constant and holds its own. And perhaps that's the biggest point of all. Copper's price stability is actually a feature, not a bug. It doesn't spike, it doesn't crash, it just is. That makes it predictable. Even your upfront $500 investment, if you have the patience to sell them back at auction, seems relatively secure. In other words, you won't lose your $500. You should at least keep what you bought it for if you're able to sell these individually online, or perhaps even a handful at a time. That makes it useful, and while it may not keep up with inflation in the traditional sense, it's still a physical object, not a digital promise. You can hold it, you can trade it, you can bury it in your backyard, or you can even use it for a post-apocalyptic project to get your Stone Age town back up and running. To be sure, there's labor involved in any example of selling that can't be overlooked. You could clone your listing on eBay 500 times to save time, and wait a week to ship out any coins that you sell all at once to save time on the effort involved, but it is still some work. That copper won't turn into $2,000 magically in your possession. But I value copper for what it is, not what it's worth. It's a survivalist coin, a prepper's token, a mutant's currency. It's not a traditional investment, yes, but it's hedging your bets. If the apocalypse never comes, you can sell your out-of-print cryptid creatures copper rounds someday down the line and at least make back close to what you paid for it, or maybe a little more, adjusted for inflation. And your upfront investment was relatively small. And then there's the prepping side. In a grid-down or post-collapse scenario, copper rounds are perfect for small trades. Think food, fuel, local services. You don't want to hand over a $40 silver round for a bottle of water or a bowl of sad-looking apples. Copper fills that gap. It's the small change of the apocalypse. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, you're not going to be able to get a millennial or whatever younger generations there are necessarily to appreciate the silver content in a 1960s dime. They're just too young for that. They won't know the history. They'll have to take your word for it. And in the case of Zombucks, your 500 copper rounds could indeed serve as the local currency of the apocalypse in a small desert town, along with your other vital preps, of course. Some examples of copper bullion rounds being used for trade, as trade tokens, I should say, are in videos I've made before. If you want to ride a wave of bullion prices spiking to the moon and maybe crashing back down to Earth, most would choose silver or gold, but make sure you don't get caught up in a fever before a crash. What copper can do is to make your stack more versatile, more visual, more aligned to the real-world survival strategies I've mentioned in a post-collapse world. It's affordable, it's collectible, it's tradable, and with some effort it could be profitable. But in a world where silver and gold are climbing fast, copper remains a quiet constant. Think of a pirate's treasure chest. Sure, you could have all gold and silver coins, but it would take quite a bit of time for a new stacker to accumulate that at today's rates. With copper, you can stack to your heart's content. Add a tube of 20 so-called semi-numismatic coins to your purchases of silver rounds to get free shipping. Maybe get some copper zombucks along with your silver zombucks. And a gold coin every now and then to spice things up. And add an investment angle to your stack. That limited zombucks design looks every bit as pretty in copper, I'd say. If you're stacking copper, let me know why in the comments. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. We talk post-collab tactics, barter logic, the kind of tech that still works when the grid doesn't, and a little bit of fiction, some games, and other weirdness, because that's what mutants and contrarians like me enjoy. Well, that's all I had for today, fellow mutants. Keep your bullion polished and your barter table ready. Until next time, this is Copper Mutant, signing out.